For centuries, this vault remained untouched, protected by royal decree and buried beneath layers of secrecy. But just 1 minute ago, Prince Edward shattered tradition and opened the very door Palisades swore would remain sealed forever. What he found inside wasn't just historical, it was devastating. This wasn't just a vault. It was a time capsule of power, betrayal, and intent. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The sound of the iron lock giving way echoed like a cannon blast through the heart of Windsor. Whispers that had remained dormant for decades were about to awaken. This wasn't the kind of vault that stored ceremonial treasures or archived photos. It was the kind spoken about in hushed tones by former butlers, the one dismissed as myth even by seasoned palace historians. Sealed under strict orders since King George VI's reign, it carried a legacy few dared to question, and none were ever permitted to open. The authorization signed just days ago came not from the king, but from an unnamed authority, raising immediate speculation about the true power dynamics within the royal walls. Edward, often labelled the overlooked sibling, stepped into the spotlight with quiet gravity. No one could understand why he, of all people, was selected to carry out this unspoken mission. His reputation as the silent steward of the family suddenly took on new meaning as he arrived at the vault flanked not by guards, but by 2 senior aides, faces stiff with unease. And within moments of the vault opening, the palace's reaction was swift and alarming. Media were stonewalled, staff were ordered off the West Wing, rumours swirled like wildfire behind velvet drapes, igniting tensions that hadn't flared this fiercely since the Queen's funeral. Inside the upper halls, aides were seen rushing with encrypted folders, whispering into phones with faces blanched in disbelief. Catherine and Princess Anne were both summoned within the hour, no public reason given. But the timing was no coincidence. Something buried, something powerful had emerged. The Queen's long-held aura of secrecy had cracked open, and what slipped through wasn't just dust and parchment, it was a threat. Because this wasn't just about old letters or forgotten jewels. This was about a truth the monarchy was never prepared to confront, one that could fracture loyalties and rattle centuries-old foundations. Beneath the protocol, beneath the pearl smiles and rehearsed waves, there lay a chamber built not to preserve legacy, but to protect the crown from itself. But what exactly did Edward find behind that iron door? And why are senior royals already bracing for fallout? Before entering the vault, Edward signed an oath unlike anything seen in modern royal record. A vow wrapped in silence and steeped in generational duty. But even as he placed his hand on that ancient crest, one question lingered. Would this discovery remain buried or be the crown's undoing? The room was hushed as Edward stood before the thick ceremonial parchment, a document so old its ink bore the fading scent of another century. The oath was more than symbolic, it was a binding agreement, etched with arcane legal language, a blend of constitutional mandate and whispered superstition. No electronic devices were allowed, no photographs, no lawyers. Only 3 pens were offered, each engraved with the insignia of George VI. But it wasn't the document itself that left Edward visibly shaken, it was what lay beside it, a locket, worn, silver, and unmistakably Elizabeth's. Inside, a photograph of her younger self, arms wrapped around a child who was not Charles nor Anne, but Edward himself. A silent reminder of the weight now resting on his shoulders, and of promises perhaps never spoken aloud but deeply understood between mother and son. 2 figures watched him closely as he scribbled his name beneath the vow. Neither were introduced, neither spoke. Both remained stiff, their faces unreadable royal historians perhaps, or legal sentinels with clear instructions not to interfere. Their presence alone confirmed what many behind palace walls had feared. The contents of this vault weren't merely sensitive, they were dangerous. Documents that had never been referenced in public archives, objects protected not by locks, but by the silence of every monarch since George VI. For decades, even the most loyal courtiers had refused to discuss what lay within. Some claimed it housed final words from Queen Mary. Others suggested it contained revised succession orders, revoked before their execution. Whatever the truth, no monarch after George dared open it, and Queen Elizabeth, the most dutiful of all, chose not to disturb its ghosts. But rumours whispered through private quarters tell a more complicated story. that Elizabeth had once confided to a single aide during her final winter, that not all secrets should die with me. The vault, though excluded from her official will, may have held truths she believed would one day be necessary should the crown ever begin to fracture from within. And it was Edward, not Charles, who had remained closest to her in those final fragile days, not in title, not in ceremony, but in trust. Which begs the question, was Edward acting on his own, breaking royal protocol in the most stunning defiance imaginable, or was he executing a final silent command, a ghost order whispered with frail breath before the nation laid its queen to rest? Whatever the answer, the weight of the crown now bore down not on the monarch, but on the brother. As the vault's twin locks clicked open with metallic finality, the whispers of 7 decades surged forward. And then, as the heavy lock gave way, Edward stepped into a chilling chamber of royal reckoning. Inside the vault, beneath layers of velvet, Edward found a collection unlike anything recorded in royal archives: handwritten letters, sealed testaments, wartime journals, and silver cases marked with royal insignias never seen before. Each artifact whispered of buried truths and potential scandal. The air in the chamber was heavy, not just with age, but with tension. Dust danced across the surface of chests bound in brass and cloaked in dark cloth, each box tagged with numbers that didn't correspond to any known archival system. They weren't stored, they were hidden. Edward moved slowly, almost reverently, as though each artifact demanded acknowledgement before being touched. A thick bundle of parchment tied with crimson ribbon caught his eye. It was brittle, fragile, and unmistakably personal. The header bore Queen Mary's seal, and within it, page after page of handwriting poured out in emotional fury. Arguments with her son, George VI, private observations about Elizabeth's temperament, and notes about a brewing family crisis that had no proper resolution. The diary did not merely document events, it judged them, dissected them, condemned them. Beside it lay folders marked with a chilling red stamp, restricted, under no circumstance to be disclosed. Inside were wartime letters, some exchanged between the royal family and Churchill's cabinet, that painted a far more complicated picture of the crown's role during World War II. Discussions of sacrifice narratives, public manipulation, and withheld truths surfaced in cold, clipped language. But it was another document that truly sent a shiver through Edward. A scroll labelled E8, personal. As he read it, his hand, Trey, embaled. It wasn't merely about the abdication. It was about what came after an arrangement, a condition, a choice that turned the official story into something entirely manufactured. In his own words, King Edward VIII described a trade of power for protection, and a warning that truth in the wrong hands will collapse the house. Further back, a velvet pouch held a brooch, untouched, still glistening with deep blue stones. But what startled Edward wasn't its design, it was the note tucked inside. In elegant script it read, "Not to be worn until the truth is known." The handwriting, aged and unmistakable, belonged to Queen Elizabeth. The very symbol of enduring monarchy had written those words and sealed this message away from the world. For Edward, the discovery was shattering. Standing alone with a cascade of royal confessions at his feet, he reportedly muttered just one phrase under his breath, barely audible, but crystal clear to the aides standing nearby. "They lied to all of us." The quiet prince, long ignored, was now the sole witness to the monarchy's buried conscience. But as the documents began to unravel the royal fabric, one name appeared again and again, changing everything. Amid the antique scrolls and fading letters, one figure emerged with shocking consistency, Catherine. Not just as the Princess of Wales, but as the named recipient of a sealed royal decree decades in the making. It wasn't coincidence, it was destiny, or something far more orchestrated. Tucked between century-old declarations and personal confessions was a letter that instantly chilled the room. Dated 1983, it was penned by Queen Elizabeth's own private secretary and sealed with the late monarch's personal crest. Inside, in neatly written script, was a single haunting phrase, "She is to carry what others could not." There was no name, no title, no position, just that sentence. But Cleep. To the back of the envelope, hidden behind a false lining, was a second note. This one bore a name written with careful precision, Catherine. A name that, in 1983, would have meant absolutely nothing to the royal institution. And yet, here it was, tucked in a vault no one had opened in over half a century. A time traveler's message, or a masterstroke of planning buried in obscurity. The deeper Edward searched, the more her presence echoed. A personal letter signed by Queen Elizabeth herself was discovered in a padded leather binder. It didn't refer to Catherine by title or station, but by bond. "To my granddaughter in spirit," the Queen began. "Should this letter find you, then you already understand the weight of silence." It spoke of trust beyond bloodlines, of legacy untethered to tradition. It warned of future turbulence and praised a quiet strength the crown had once dismissed. The language was affectionate, reverent, almost spiritual, and Edward, now fully immersed in the vault's revelations, knew that this was no passive mention. Catherine had been watched, chosen, and perhaps prepared long before anyone else suspected. But the most unnerving confirmation came not from pen and ink, but from voice. Within a dusty lacquer box lay a spool of audio tape, labeled simply, "Matriarchal Reflections, 1948. When played through the restricted reel-to-reel device tucked beside it, the voice of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, filled the air. She spoke in calm, authoritative tones, offering observations on duty, legacy, and a future queen. And then came the line no one had expected. "It will be a girl, not of our birth, but born of our burdens. She will be the chosen girl for Windsor's soul." The timing, the content, the tone, it sent a tremor down Edward's spine, because everything pointed to Catherine. Every whisper, every page, every echo from the past, reports soon, surfaced that Edward had reached out to Catherine directly after reviewing the final file. No aides, no protocols, just a private call placed from a secured palace line. Hours later, palace staff confirmed that Catherine had received a confidential parcel, delivered under discreet escort and marked with a restricted insignia not seen since the Queen's passing. She didn't speak publicly. She didn't need to. The palace corridors buzzed not with words, but with the understanding that something ancient had just passed into her hands. And it wasn't just history. It was something alive, something moving, something waiting to be awakened. But Catherine wasn't the only one pulled into this maze of secrets. There was another, and her reaction would ignite fury. When Camilla learned her name wasn't mentioned once, not in letters, not in heirloom claims, not even in advisory records, she erupted. Sources say the Queen Consort issued an ultimatum behind palace walls: "Erase what was found, or I walk." But what power does she truly hold? If the vault never acknowledged her, the revelation struck with the weight of betrayal. For a woman who had spent years clawing her way through suspicion, scandal, and skepticism to stand beside the king, this was not just an omission, it was a humiliation. Camilla had entered the royal sphere knowing she would always face comparisons, shadows, and inherited judgments. But she had also believed that with time, her place would be sealed in legacy. That belief shattered the moment Edward's findings were relayed in hushed tones throughout Buckingham's inner sanctum. Every document catalogued, every name preserved, every artifact assigned to a lineage except hers. Not a single mention, not even a reference by title. It was as if the vault and everything it represented had deliberately cast her out. Behind closed doors, she reportedly demanded answers. The confrontation with King Charles in the Green Drawing Room was said to be one of the most explosive since his accession. Eyewitnesses claimed raised voices, doors slammed, and aides frozen outside for over 40 minutes. Camilla, once composed and calculating, was now visibly unhinged by what she saw as a deliberate act of erasure. She insisted there must have been a mistake, that something had been misinterpreted, that the Queen would never have left her out, at least not entirely. But Charles had seen the records, he'd read the inscriptions, and though he tried to console her with political reassurance, his silence confirmed the worst. The Queen had not made a place for Camilla within the vault's truth. The emotional toll cracked something deeper between them. Charles, torn between honoring his mother's final legacy and defending the woman who had stood beside him through exile and restoration, found himself trapped in a suffocating moral dilemma. Camila, sensing that even his sympathy was laced with shame, delivered her ultimatum with chilling clarity: either suppress the vault's findings or risk the collapse of everything they had built together. It was not framed as a plea, it was a threat, a line drawn not in protocol but in pride, and some within the palace began to whisper that her threat to leave her royal role wasn't grief, it was leverage. Then came the sight that sent speculation spiraling. Sophie Wessex, quiet and composed as ever, was seen exiting the same corridor mere moments later, but this time she was visibly shaken, clutching a folder and wiping tears from her face. Whether she'd been caught in the crossfire or pulled into the debate remains unknown, but her distress added weight to the notion that the Queen's choices had not just affected Camila, they were reshaping every alliance within the family. The vault, once silent, was now tearing open ifts that decades of diplomacy had barely managed to seal. As tensions erupted behind gilded doors, Edward prepared to reveal the vault's most guarded truth, one never meant for a monarch's eyes. Buried beneath layers of silk and secrecy lay a letter, addressed to the future monarch in a time of crisis. The words within held a confession so raw, so unbecoming of the crown, that Edward hesitated. But when he read it aloud to Charles, the king reportedly wept and whispered, "Then I was never meant to rule?" Folded within a satin-lined envelope, and tucked behind a panel hidden inside the vault's eastern wall, the letter bore the personal seal of King George VI. It had not been catalogued or indexed with the other documents, suggesting deliberate concealment. Dated shortly after the end of World War II, the letter opened with solemn reflection, but quickly devolved into something much more intimate, a confession laced with guilt, fear, and irreversible consequence. King George spoke not to the public, nor to his children, but to an unknown monarch he imagined would inherit the crown in an hour of reckoning. And in it, he laid bare a secret long suspected in whispers but never proven. The succession had not followed its natural course. He admitted to breaking an unspoken agreement with his daughters Elizabeth and Margaret, forged during the bleakest days of war, a pact of honesty, a shared vision for a post-war monarchy, one that, according to him, was ultimately sacrificed to preserve the illusion of stability. More stunning still were the hints of manipulated records changes to official lineage charts, decisions made under pressure from senior clerics and political advisors, all designed to keep the monarchy visually intact during a fragile era. And, in a gut-wrenching admission, George expressed doubt that Charles would ever be capable of carrying the weight of the institution. "He will wear the crown," the letter stated, "but not its wisdom." The sentence shook Edward. It was not an attack, but a lamentation, a plea across time from a father who feared the future would suffer for choices made in desperation. The envelope had been marked redacted for future stability in faded ink, confirming that it had been shielded from view by generations of gatekeepers sworn to uphold the myth rather than the man. When Edward read the letter to Charles, the reaction was instant and haunting. The king, a man who had navigated decades of scrutiny and personal reinvention, collapsed into silence. According to a source within Clarence's house, he sat motionless for nearly an hour before murmuring, "Then I was never meant to rule." That moment pierced through decades of certainty. Charles had been raised under the weight of expectation, burdened with the image of inevitable kingship. But now, for the first time, he was confronted with a truth that stripped away titles and crowns and left only doubt. It wasn't merely about his mother's judgment or the public's trust. It was about a father who had feared him unready, unworthy, unchosen. And for Edward, the emotional toll deepened. He had spent a lifetime in the background, loyal, silent, dutiful. Now he stood at the crossroads of truth and tradition, asked to carry the burden of a revelation that could shatter what remained of the monarchy's illusion. His loyalty to the crown had always been unwavering, but what if that very crown had been founded on a deception too dangerous to ignore? The letter, now read, could not be unread. The truth, once known, could not be buried again. And just when it seemed the storm had peaked, a final, dusty chest was unlocked, and inside lay the vault's most dangerous revelation. A chest sealed with wax and an unfamiliar crest revealed what no one dared imagine: a detailed oud-line chart that diverged from official records. If proven true, it wouldn't just rewrite the monarchy. It could remove Charles entirely and place another at the head of the realm. The palace is terrified, and for good reason. The chest was unlike the others. It bore no royal insignia familiar to the present generation, only a sharp-edged emblem, rumored to belong to a defunct branch of the royal household, exiled in the aftermath of scandal nearly a century ago. Breaking the wax revealed not relics or correspondence, but a thick, weathered scroll, tightly wound and secured by 3 crimson ribbons. Inside, drawn meticulously by hand, was a sprawling genealogical chart beginning in the late 1800s. At first glance, it appeared to mirror what the public had long accepted as royal truth. But as Edward unfurled the final sections, a chilling deviation emerged: an alternate line of succession that bypassed Queen Elizabeth II entirely. According to the annotations, a child born of Princess Mary in the 1930s, hidden from the public eye, had produced heirs whose existence had never been acknowledged in the official narrative. The implications were staggering. Names, dates, and locations, none publicly recorded, matched whispers that had circulated in royal staff circles for decades. Beside the chart were fragile documents, many handwritten, that detailed a planned cover-up. Letters between senior aides and foreign diplomats alluded to a necessary omission to preserve global perception. The motive wasn't just domestic stability, it was international image. The notion that a parallel royal bloodline could have been deliberately erased to maintain Elizabeth's uncontested rise was not only dangerous, it was treasonous in its potential fallout. And then, tucked in the bottom of the chest, Edward found them. 6 envelopes, each marked with a date and the faint abbreviation DNA. Sam. Ples, possibly collected in secret, perhaps meant to test or refute the truth, but none had ever been opened. Faced with a truth too volatile for the public and too damning for the crown, Edward took the only action he believed was safe. He removed the chart and delivered it quietly to a private historian long trusted by the Queen for his discretion and expertise in royal legal interpretation. The meeting took place off the record, away from Windsor, and without any official trail. Within hours, however, the palace legal team had entered emergency meetings. Phones were cut. Security at archival wings was doubled. The vault, once a relic of the past, had transformed into a live wire. The question on everyone's lips was no longer what was true, but who already knew. Every corridor in the palace now echoed with unease. If this alternate lineage ever saw the light of day, if a legitimate heir could be named, Charles wouldn't just face questions, he'd face removal. And for the first time since the crown passed to him, the monarch found himself staring into the abyss of disinheritance. Not by scandal or vote, but by blood. But before anything could be contained, the truth began slipping into the hands of those who would never let it rest. At 12:03 a.m., encrypted files from an unknown royal staffer hit the inboxes of 3 international journalists. Within hours, rumors ignited, images leaked, and the vault's contents were no longer confined to palace walls. Panic surged through Windsor because what had been hidden for a century was now a ticking time bomb. The leak wasn't gradual, it was surgical. Dozens of high-resolution images captured the interior of the vault, each one framed to expose the most sensitive artifacts. The sealed chart, the marked DNA envelopes, even the letter from King George VI was photographed. The words underlined in red: "He will wear the crown, but not its wisdom." Alongside the images came transcripts of key documents typed in haste but verified as authentic. Names, dates, and bloodlines, once protected by royal silence, were now in the hands of journalists known not for discretion but for defiance. It was no longer a matter of if the public would find out. It was how long the palace could hold the walls from crumbling. By 3 a.m., global headlines screamed with words the firm had fought to avoid for generations: alternate heir, hidden bloodline, vault betrayal. Phones inside Buckingham Palace lit up like a battlefield. Aides scrambled. Press officers were summoned from their homes. And yet, the official response from the palace was deafening in its vagueness: no comment at this time. That silence, designed to control the narrative, only fanned the flames. Within minutes, speculation spun out of control. Social media became a storm of fury and fascination. Hashtags like #VaultTruth and #CrownLieExposed surged to the top of global trends. The monarchy's pristine exterior had cracked and the world wasn't looking away. Meanwhile, behind the gates, the power players moved quickly. Catherine arrived at Clarence's house under discreet escort, entering through the east wing where no cameras waited. Whispers of an emergency crisis summit flooded the press. She did not exit for hours. Inside, sources claimed she was presented with a summary of the leaked material and asked to prepare a formal statement. But what she said behind those doors remains a mystery. Across the courtyard, Camila exited the royal offices in silence. No aides flanked her. No press officer trailed behind. The same woman who once demanded her name be etched into the pages of royal history was now walking away with a face drained of resolve. Lick confidence plummeted. Polls ran overnight, asking whether the monarchy could survive this revelation. LF the nation said no. International broadcasters demanded answers. Members of parliament were reportedly briefed in closed-door sessions, and yet, through it all, Edward remained quiet. Until a single flash of movement was seen through the palace's north window, Edward standing alone reading a final paper beneath the vault's closing light. He had agreed to make a public address, but before that he had one last task to fulfill. Because behind all the chaos, one sealed envelope had remained unopened, and Edward now knew it was time. With shaking hands, Edward opened the last envelope. It was addressed to him alone by Queen Elizabeth II, a final letter penned in her last year, hidden from even her private secretary. And its contents were not only a confession, they were a command, one that could forever sever the line of power as we know it. The paper was yellowed but intact, the ink faint yet precise. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, elegant, controlled, and deeply personal. From the very first line, it was clear this was not a ceremonial message. This was a farewell forged in conscience. Elizabeth's words did not defend the past. Instead, they carried the burden of it. She acknowledged that truths had been buried not for selfish gain, but for what she believed to be the nation's fragile peace. She admitted to orchestrating silences, omitting names, and reinforcing traditions she knew were cracked beneath the surface. Her confession was not without sorrow, but it was her next words that sent a tremor through Edward's heart. "There will come a moment, dear Edward, when all I shielded will be laid bare. When that moment arrives, you must not protect the crown, you must protect the soul of the realm." And then came the final instruction. The legacy does not belong to those who demanded it. It belongs to the one with steady hands and silent strength. You will know what. Oh, she is. You have always known. Edward didn't need to guess. The Queen's reference was crystal clear. Catherine, the woman who had never pursued power, but had earned something far rarer, reverence. The quiet anchor in chaos, the consistent figure when others had faltered. Elizabeth had seen it before the world had, and now she was asking Edward to act not as a prince, not as a brother, but as the executor of a dying monarch's true will. Edward sat alone for a long while, staring at the final words penned by the woman who had once cradled him as a boy, who had confided in him during the darkest nights of Windsor's long silence. His entire life had been defined by duty without decision. Now he held in his hand the power to reshape everything. His chest tightened with fear, but also with clarity. There was no longer a question of loyalty. The Queen had chosen truth, and she had chosen him to deliver it. Slowly he folded the letter, placed it in his inner pocket, and stood. Outside, the world was already watching. Cameras lined the gates. Reporters waited with bated breath. The air crackled with tension, speculation, and disbelief. And as Edward stepped toward the press briefing room, every step echoed like a drumbeat of finality. He was no longer just the royal in the background. He was now the hinge on which history would swing. What he would say in the coming moments would either preserve the monarchy as it was, or ignite its reckoning. But in his heart he knew he wasn't there to protect a throne. He was there to protect the truth. And as Edward stepped into the light, vault behind him and truth ahead, the world waited breathless for the words that would echo through royal history. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.